Mr. Speaker, I rise with your leave, this time to present the National Disaster Management Amendment Bill 2020. And this bill, in the main, seeks to amend the National Disaster Management Bill, the Parent Act. Specifically, there is an amendment to Section 2 of the Principal Act by adding the following new definitions in the correct alphabetical order. National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, referred to under Section 9A. A National Emergency Operations Center, which means the National Emergency Operations Center, NEOC, referred to under Section 9B. At Clause 4, there's an amendment of the Act by adding Part 3A. And at Part 3A, we have NEMA and the NEOC being defined. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, shall monitor and supervise any activity which may have direct or indirect bearing on the level of national disaster preparedness, prevention and safety in St. Christopher and Nevis. And the 9B, National Emergency Operations Center, NEOC. And it says that the Executive Committee of the National Emergency Management Center may be activated in response to a national disaster. 2, the National Emergency Operations Center shall be located at the National Emergency Management Agency building, Limekiln, St. Kitts, or at such other location as agreed upon by the Executive Committee. And 3, once activated, the Executive Committee of the National Emergency Operations Center shall be the point on which all official disaster reports and inquiries shall be directed. 4, the National Emergency Operations Center shall be managed by the National Emergency Management Agency. And 5th, the standard operating procedure for the National Emergency Operations Center shall be set out in the National Disaster Plan. Mr. Speaker, this is a very short bill, and it is a consequential bill that follows naturally from the discussions we've been having with regard to COVID-19 and other related matters as they all attend in relation to the pandemic. Indeed, in the bill before, we have made reference to these two entities, NEMA and the NEOC. The critically important roles of both NEMA and the NEOC are expressly now provided for within the new COVID bill, and we therefore wish to make the consequential amendment to the National Disaster Management Act for the purposes of greater alignment with the national disaster legislative framework. We anticipate, Mr. Speaker, that there will be further and more comprehensive reviews and modification of the National Disaster Management Act to seek to ensure that the administrative and institutional framework that is well established under the National Disaster Management Plan is captured under the new law. In fact, the National Disaster Management Plan regulates collaboration and the coordination of efforts during times of disaster and/or emergency. And it goes without saying, Mr. Speaker, that ideally all the relevant persons and agencies should be well aligned during the critical times. In that vein, Mr. Speaker, the expression NEMA has been defined and its powers have been clearly articulated in the amendment that I just read. Similarly, the NEOC, which is the National Emergency Operations Center, its location has been identified and linked, of course, to the National Emergency Management Agency. So, Speaker, there are a number of different persons and agencies involved in various disaster management exercises, and they may at times have similar or overlapping responsibilities. In fact, Mr. Speaker, each and every one of us has an important role to play in the fight to defeat the pandemic which we are now faced with, COVID-19. We know that we have a personal duty and responsibility to take care of ourselves, our families, by wearing masks, sanitizing our hands, practicing the physical distancing. All of these were covered in the legislation which we debated before. And what this attempts to do really is to put on stronger footing the operations at NEMA and the NEOC, and to ensure that we have an alignment with the COVID-19 bill in terms of expectations and the coordinating role. As we discuss NEMA and the NEOC, we would want just to add a note of gratitude and appreciation for the tremendous work that our people, our patriots, have been doing over the last several months, when the added burden of marshalling, coordinating the country's response to a global pandemic which came, as it were, out of nowhere and devastated everywhere that it went. Our people have stood fit for purpose, fit to answer the call of duty. And in this regard, I must commend the sterling efforts of Mr. Abdias Samuel and all the others within this department that have worked so tirelessly and selflessly to put the country in good stead and in good standing. All of them on the task force have delivered yeoman service. To date, we have not paid one extra cent to any member of the task force for work associated with the pandemic. Clearly, they understand that this is a call of duty. And our first challenge and our first opportunity must be to get our country back as near to normal as possible. When that work is done, we could discuss other issues related to that. So on that note of high commendation for the highest sacrifices that are being made by those at NEMA, by those at the task force, by those at the NEOC and their counterparts in the island of Nevis, I want to commend this non-controversial bill for safe passage through the Honourable House. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.